Hi everyone, I hope you're doing very well. Our gospel reading today comes from John's first chapter, verses 1 through 18. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of the blood or the will of the flesh or of the will of men, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.' From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." This is the gospel of the Lord. When Jesus was here on earth, one argument that broke out over and over again with his followers, his disciples, was this: who's the greatest? His disciples would go at each other about who had the most faith, who was the most like Jesus, who was the best servant, who would be sitting next to Jesus in heaven. In our day, the line, "who's the greatest?" has become most closely associated with Muhammad Ali. It is once reported that he told a flight attendant that he refused to wear a seatbelt on an airplane because he was Superman, and Superman doesn't need no seatbelt. The flight attendant's response: Superman doesn't need no airplane either. We're going to talk a little bit today about this concept of control. And with that, the concept of what is going on in our internal lives. And it's especially fitting with a new year. Listen to this anonymous quote. "Many people look forward to the new year for a new start to old habits." Our gospel reading fits nicely in here. The writer, John, is the person who reportedly is closest to Jesus, and the gospel writer, Matthew, is also a devoted disciple. Mark and Luke gather a lot of stories and accounts from other people, but when we look at the book of John, you're reading words that are written from the heart. This is a guy who is with Jesus in some of the most meaningful moments of his life. John heard more than the other disciples and gospel writers. He saw more. He was one of Jesus' closest friends. And John doesn't retrace many of the events that are already described in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. He doesn't write a chronological story of Jesus' life. John writes for these reasons. He writes so that we know Jesus is the Messiah, the one that everyone's been waiting for, and so that we believe that this life is not all that there is. And he centers on the who and the why of our faith lives. In short, John's writing aims for the heart and the internal life. Who's this Jesus guy? And why should that make any difference to us? The verses I just read are often called the prologue, and they are a summary of John's convictions about Jesus. John focuses on the central fact of our Christian faith. Christianity is not a philosophy. It's about a person. And that person is the fundamental of our faith. Other world religions focus upon teachings and ideas and philosophies of their founders and teachers, but Christianity is about having a personal relationship with the actual person. That's why Jesus is the most astonishing individual in history. More books have been written, more music composed, pictures painted, dramas performed about Jesus than any other person. And when John begins his gospel, he does not start it with Jesus' birth. Instead, he moves out beyond human history. He starts with the words, "in the beginning." Did the words sound familiar to you? Well, they certainly go back to Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And John starts with God. And what does he tell us? In the beginning was the Word. The source of everything was and is Jesus. The source is God. The source is perfect love and goodness and light. And how does that translate into everyday life? Have you ever wondered why letters are signed sincerely? Well, you probably haven't. But here's why. The practice has its origins in ancient Rome. Roman sculptors often concealed cracks in apparently flawless marble statues using melted beeswax. And when that wax would dry and crumble, the angry purchaser sought compensation. Reputable sculptors guaranteed their work as sine cera, which means without wax. Hence, yours sincerely. We sign that our words are true and that we are people of integrity. Integrity is so important in all areas of life because what is on the inside, what's going on in your heart, will spill out into your life. That is in many ways the beginning of who we are. The inside stuff makes all the difference. So what is going on in you? In many ways, you and I are greatly tainted by the sin in our lives. And though it may seem small to us, it affects our lives in dramatic ways. Author Henry Cloud talks about a time when he was a clinical director of a psychiatric hospital. And every week there was a meeting of the doctors, psychologists, and nurses, and all of the therapists. They would get together and they would review each patient's treatment. They would talk about what was happening in the group and the individual therapy, and each patient's progress and the action plan that they would use to help them. Cloud says he loved this time every week. And his team would celebrate patient successes and breakthroughs, but they would also agonize over the difficulties and the misfortunes. Now, here are a couple examples. Alex is having a hard time this week. He found out about his uncle who has held him together and that he is moving away. And Alex is afraid of what he is going to do without him. He fears going back to drugs and his old friends. Another example. A patient named Susan was getting ready to be discharged. And here's what the therapist said: Susan has done great. She is ready to go back to grad school. Her energy has returned. She is stable. Her depression is gone. I think everything is in place. Cloud writes that the next moment was one he'll always remember. It was time to talk about a patient named Phoebe. And he could tell everyone's expression changed. Their faces fell. Here's why. Phoebe was a difficult person to like. She had developed a way about her that was off-putting, even when she was talking with others. And it seemed that something was always wrong with everyone else, with the world around her, even those who were trying to help her. Her husband was very familiar with being wrong in Phoebe's eyes. And here's what her psychologist said about her. It seems Phoebe has no interest in having an interior life. Her attitudes, her hurts, her strengths, her patterns of thinking and behaving, her spiritual life, embracing her real suffering and working up the courage to resolve it. Cloud says, as long as she is not going to embrace her interior life, we all knew that her life was not going to change much at all. The internal life is so important. Character, integrity, honesty, trust. These are the things that lead to love in our lives. I'd say it's almost impossible to have love without trust. It's been an observation I've made over the years. The inner stuff greatly affects the outside world. It's the human condition, isn't it? We ignore or put off our internal lives. We keep ourselves busy. We dull the pain. We distract ourselves. We don't think about the things that are not pleasant. And as a result, we may not have the outside life that we want. We may not have the relationships we want. We may not have the faith we want. For you and me today, with the starting of a new year, it is the best time I can think of to go for it. The best time to not only take an inventory and set some goals, but to go to the source, to the beginning, and maybe even start over in some places in life. Now, here are some good goals. Instead of trying to lose weight this year, make friends with a neighbor. Maybe just meet someone on your street you don't know well. Bring them some cookies. Or if you find yourself coping with things in life in unhealthy ways, instead of just trying to cut out the unhealthy behaviors, get to the root and start to cope with the things in healthy ways. So schedule an appointment with a counselor or seek professional assistance in moving past the troubles of your past. And if your relationship with God is really at a standstill, make an effort to invest some time alone. Maybe walk more, pray more, come to church more, join in with our Bible studies here. Can't let that opportunity go by. For so many people, it is so much easier to complain about things going wrong than taking the time to correct some very easy things to correct. And sometimes it's not easy. But it is my prayer for us and for our community that 2025 will be a rich time of great spiritual growth for all of us. And it is my hope that we continue to support our community around us and to bring hope to every heart that we encounter. It is my hope that our community is known as a place where people come and find real healing and find purpose in life, knowing that God is the very root, from the very beginning, goodness and light. Please pray with me. God, we thank you for all that you continue to do with us. We thank you for our community here and the ways that we are interacting in the world around us. We thank you for the years you've given us, the time that we have. And God, we ask you would continue to use our lives in ways that bring light into a dark world, that bring hope to the people who need to know of your goodness. We ask it all in Jesus, our risen Savior's name. Amen.